Hi, I'm Vidisha. I'm the communications specialist for the Associates of the Boston Public Library, and I'm so excited to interview you today.
I'm thrilled to be here. I'm Ilyon. I'm the author of Master Slave Husband Wife, which is the true story of Ellen and William Craft, who about 175 years ago, they embark on this extraordinary journey for freedom, with Ellen passing as a rich, white, disabled man, and William posing as her slave. And it's about their journey out of the South, from Georgia all the way to Philadelphia, to Boston where we are, but then ultimately beyond. And I owe a huge debt to the Boston Public Library for amazing research that made my book possible.
My name is Jay Moschella. I'm the Curator of Rare Books and Manuscripts here at the Boston Public Library.
Ilyon, could you tell us the story of discovering letters that became the foundation of your book? What drew you to telling the story of William and Ellen Craft?
First of all, it's the Crafts' own words, their own published narrative, rare published narrative, which you have a copy of right here, that pulled me into the story. So this itself is a page turner, but there's a lot that the Crafts could not or would not say. And so that's really when I started to research at places like the Boston Public Library to sort of try to create the equivalent of an orchestral score to go with the melody that they wrote. And what voices came out of the archives, just unbelievable, out of the letters that you have here. So this is an incredible book. I mean, this is a story that launched it all, that makes it possible for us to know so much about the Crafts today. It's their own published written words where they recount their journey. They had spoken this story many times, both in the United States and then in the UK, but this is the story written down. And it's always like really moving for me to see an actual edition.
Yeah, and you know what is particularly amazing about this copy is that it's not any old copy of the narrative itself, but this is a copy that is inscribed by William. When you compare the handwriting, you can see they're identical to William. When you compare the handwriting, you can see they're identical to William Lloyd Garrison, who he sends a copy to from London in June of 1860. So right around kind of the same time he's writing this letter. So again, you see this network of correspondence that is not only reporting events and describing other people, but actually sending books and recently published materials back and forth across the Atlantic. This is a book that was actually digitized with the help of the Associates in 2011. And it really kind of illustrates the depth of the collections here at the BPL. This book has been here since 1891. It was donated by Garrison's son. And for a very long time, it was in a collection that we now call the Founding Research Collection, which is to say, essentially, the circulating research collection of the BPL, which is difficult to imagine calling out a book that belonged to Garrison sent to him by the Crafts. But it's now been here for so long and it's been used so heavily that it does require some further conservation. But aside from the rare and amazing first edition of their narrative, the fact that it preserves this network of communication, to me, is breathtaking.
And has William Craft's hand in it.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, we knew we could see the dedication. We weren't quite sure if William or Ellen wrote it themselves or if somebody else wrote it and sent it on their behalf. But when you compare the two letters, it is very, very clearly Craft's handwriting, William Craft's handwriting.
Which means that he held this book.
Which means they held it and made the decision to send it over. So meaningful unto itself.
How did you learn that the BPL Special Collections contained materials supported by the Associates which were essential to your work?
I don't think it's possible to do research on the Crafts or many other key figures from this period without the Boston Public Library's collections. It's really through scholars, past and present, whose work I sort of followed like breadcrumbs that led me straight to your archives. One of the most extraordinary to be so close to was a very rare letter written by Ellen Craft. And this is very soon after actually she got to England and really got to study and learn how to read and write for the first time. So to see her exquisite penmanship on the page is a real gift, and I'd be happy to read it. This is from the Ockham School near Ripley, Surrey, England, November 29th, 1851. We, as you well know, have been deprived of the art of writing and consequently felt our inability of addressing a letter to you. The letter of introduction, which you were so kind as to give us, was to such a kind and valuable friend that we trust not to labor under this disadvantage much longer. And will be much pleased if you would send us the Liberator occasionally, so that we may know what is going on. Please to remember us very kindly to Mr. Garrison, Mr. Walcott, and all other inquiring friends, and believe us to be yours very truly, William and Ellen Craft. To the Reverend Samuel May, 21 Cornhill, Boston.
I was wondering what your emotional response was the first time you read this letter.
So the first time I read it, like in person, actually there are multiple times when I read this letter, or two firsts, I should say. The first was reading it on the screen, because the Boston Public Library, I believe, has digitized so many letters. So it was a eureka moment to discover this and find the words on the page through Ellen Craft's hand. You can almost see, you can see the texture of it too in the high resolution that you have on the screen. But then actually to be here and to be in the presence of this piece of paper that Ellen Craft once picked up and touched, and to see these letters that she formed, and to see her artistry performed. You can see she had incredible manual dexterity. She had a talent with visual things. You can see all of that in the flourishes in every stroke. And so for me to actually, every time I see this page in person, I get chills up and down my spine.
Could you elaborate on how you navigated the BPL's anti-slavery collection, which contains 14,000 letters which were preserved and digitized through the support of the associates? Did you work primarily in person or using the online materials?
I had the fortunate experience of getting to do both. So there's nothing like that eureka moment of having this live letter right in front of you. But there's certain times, like for example, the pandemic, which overlapped with my writing years and my researching years, where it was simply not possible to get to the physical documents. And that's when the digitized documents were a godsend. Entering the digital archives was like walking into a whole 19th century world. I wouldn't have been able to do justice, I think, to the Craft story and to this whole world of Boston without that digital access. One question I get a lot is, how do you represent Ellen Craft? You have, this letter here that she wrote that you have in your collections. You have the Craft's 1860 narrative, but there's really very little else. And one word that I use to describe what I tried to do in sort of getting to this mystery is eavesdropping. So you eavesdrop by listening to what other people are saying, or listening to fragments of things that she said that other people have overheard and that they're recording. And this is a prime example of how we can eavesdrop using these letters. So this is a letter that was written by a Mrs. Mitchell in England. So Ellen Craft is living in the Estlins' house, and she's being watched, and she really is being recorded. They're like pages and pages of letters where they're studying her and they're quoting her. And this is one of my very favorite quotations. So it's right here. So Ellen Craft is going in all these like amazing drawing rooms and stuff, and she's seeing things that frankly her enslavers could not have dreamed of and probably would have envied. And you know what she says here? She says that Ellen has an oft-quoted wish. "Oh, how I should like my old mistress could see me now." She has this moment of triumph, right? As she's in this incredible place and meeting all these people, and she's seeing things that they couldn't see. If only my mistress could see me now. Is that amazing?
It is amazing. And what's secondarily amazing about correspondence like this and about the networks of information that it preserves, you can recover so many disparate pieces from different sources, particularly in comprehensive collections like this, where you have not only a person who is reporting the stuff, but these kind of secondhand events that are absolutely recorded nowhere else.
So to continue on the subject of eavesdropping, there's an astonishing moment that happens on this page. So this woman, Mrs. Mitchell, is recounting how she loves to see Ellen in particular in their house, and that she spies Ellen working on the steps, and she quotes her as singing, and she sings a line. So Ellen Craft is seen on this part of the page singing, "I shall not be a slave anymore." So to know that she's heard singing these words, "I shall not be a slave anymore," in triumph, in England, in this home where she's being watched, is one thing. But then you can actually I used this line. I was like, can we find the song? And this line appears in the Anti-Slavery Harp, William Wells Brown's song collection, which I believe you also have here. As I found that song. The song is called "A Fugitive's Triumph." So to think that Ellen Craft is singing "A Fugitive's Triumph," and we can get just that tiny glimpse of it, that little sample of that song here, is just incredible.
So there's so many different threads that you're talking about weaving together to kind of comprise this, make this narrative. Do you recall what led you to this particular letter itself?
Well, as you said, there's a whole bunch of letters that are coming out of this household. So I knew from other secondary sources that you had a really valuable collection of letters here. And I just was reading everything from the period. Mm-hmm. And you can do some by searching. You're looking for craft, but it's not perfect. So sometimes you just have to read everything.
Yeah.
And this was an incredible one that came up.
I read in your book about how digital technologies make items like these more accessible than they have been in the past. Can you elaborate on that?
Oh yeah, I mean, the amazing thing is that anyone, anywhere, all over from anywhere in the world can access these incredible materials. You can do that research, like you don't have to travel to Boston. And I think it's an amazing way of democratizing the research process and opening it up and creating conversations really, not just all over Boston, not just in the scholarly community, but all over the world.
What drew you to the narrative nonfiction approach for your book? And were there any challenges in blending research with storytelling?
Well, I love to read novels personally. And I mean, I love to dig through big history books, but not in the same way. And I felt like to sort of do justice to the Crafts, really that page-turning, rollicking, incredibly profound story that they tell, I wanted to create a story style that would sort of be able to support their story and sort of bring it to life as much as possible.
Absolutely. I felt that way when I read your book, that I was in it with them. And also, I don't know if you've read Circe by Madeline Miller, but that was another book that that's mythology, but the narrative approach made it so immersive and easy to read. And I read an article that you recently read Percy Jackson for the first time, and that's also like a narrative approach that actually taught a lot of kids, including myself, a lot about Greek mythology. So I love the narrative approach. I think it's a really great way to make history come alive.
Yeah, I mean, I think the narrative will make you want to know what happens, and I think that's something. The Craft story is deeply suspenseful. Mm-hmm. So why kill that, right? Mm-hmm. Why not use that? And if I can have the reader, feel like they're on the ground, but then learn as they're going on the ground, I feel like that's much better than me saying, well, then 1848, right? Start leading with the dates and with the information.
Absolutely. And I feel like you touched on something, on a similar concept at the film screening when you said that the way that the film brought that action to life, that was really exciting because it's telling the story in another way that can make it more accessible to many different types of people.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the Crafts wrote their original narrative. William Still has his version, which you have here. There's been a lot of great scholarship. I wanted to do something a little bit different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. You've written about certain Korean concepts impacting your understanding of Ellen and William Craft. Can you describe how your Korean American heritage might have affected your storytelling?
I think in the writing of the story, like not just my heritage, but really kind of every seminal experience that I had, I needed to sort of tap into. I brought in whatever I could in the telling of the story. So in terms of my Korean heritage and how that started, I mean, I guess in a way, like my whole reception of stories was originally through Korean folk stories that my dad told to me as nighttime stories, good night stories when I was little. I drew on my experiences in music and in theater and documentary film and all painting, sort of everything I could possibly use. I drew from in order to be able to write the story, because the story is so epic, so larger than life. It really calls for everything.
Absolutely. A scrapbook found in the collection became a turning point for your writing. Could you describe how and why you think that happened?
Oh, that was really exciting. I knew that Ellen Craft's enslavers had written letters, had kept some records that documented their point of view. That was something that I wanted to make sure to do, is to sort of try to, as much as possible, to get into the Craft's point of view first. And fortunately, we have their narrative and other pieces of history that enable us to do that. But I also wanted to see where the enslavers were coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there was a letter that Robert Collins had written, and I didn't know where to find it. And I went on a very long, to me, a really thrilling goose chase that involved a librarian from the archives here, digitized letters and scrapbooks and things like that, and a major eureka moment for me as I saw something which is in this book now, that flashed on the screen for the first time for me. That is really where I got to see, this is how Ellen Craft's would-be captor, past captor and would-be captor, this is how he saw the world. It opened up on that page.
This is the page that included the letter, I believe?
Yes, yeah. And, I didn't have access to this because the archives were being renovated at the time, and I found this clue that this letter existed, and then I learned that it was in the scrapbook, and there was no way for me to get my hands on the scrapbook, and I was dying. But then one of your fellow librarians actually took the information, the little clues that I had, and put it through a newspaper archive, and actually was able to pop up the very letter that ends up in here. But I would never have been able to find that letter without him.
Yeah, and I was actually sitting on the desk that day when you were here in the reading room, and this was a particularly difficult thing to find because of the object that it is set into. And what we're looking at here is a scrapbook in a sort of somewhat deteriorated condition. But it's a scrapbook that was assembled and compiled by Theodore Parker himself. So a central player in resistance to the Fugitive Slave Act in Boston, someone who was giving aid to the Crafts in his own home, and deeply, deeply involved in the movement itself. He was also a book collector and a researcher, and he was collecting all of these clippings and broadsides that were being posted around Boston and bringing them together into his own collection. And because he was making this in the 1860s, kind of on his own, out of newsprint, it is so fragile today that it's really very lightly cataloged and very, very difficult to handle.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually opened the scrapbook until you had requested it.
This is the kind of thing that you can use it more properly than I can, right? But it's a micro spatula that you use to turn the pages. And if you don't, if I were to put my paws on this, you guys would jump on me.
Well, so we would very gently and supportively correct you. But for materials that are particularly fragile, we have a kind of a host of special tools that we can give to people in our reading room to help them handle the materials more safely. These pages are so acidic and have been so heavily used that to try to kind of manipulate them with your hands can lead you to cracking the pages or otherwise damaging it. So the spatula comes in handy in some cases.
Yeah, so you have the spatula, and then you've got the rope.
Yeah, we have a specialized book weights, and so our job here at the library is to make all of these materials accessible to anyone whenever they want them. And so we maintain a range of different tools, like specialized cradles and weights that we will educate folks how to use when they come into our reading room. So.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say there are times when I just want to just open it up so fast and take a look. But also there's something about the tool of things that is really super fun.
Yeah, it feels very forensic.
You write in your book about two things that speak to why the associates support the preservation and accessibility of the BPL special collections. First, and I quote, "As scholars have discussed, the traditional historical archives are an unstable preserve, particularly where the histories of Black and enslaved people are concerned." And you also write, "Who kept those records cannot be changed, but how we read and interpret them, what we choose to see, and how we tell the story now, all transform." It would be great if you could elaborate on the interpretation of these archives and the impact that interpretations can have.
You have these same items, right? But just like beauty is in the eye of the beholder, like the story is in the eye of the beholder and in the teller of the story. So you can have the same source, and if you and I come to that same document, we might read it completely differently depending on who we are and where we're coming from. So both the artifact itself is really important, but also having a diversity of people looking at these sources and interpreting them in different ways is also really important.
Absolutely. You mentioned the importance of having a diverse press and reaching outside one's bubble as a reader. Can you elaborate on that? I feel like that's a little bit similar to what you just mentioned.
So I'm always trying to reach outside of my bubble as both a reader and as a writer. So as a reader, I'm trying to familiarize, find myself entering different stories, different points of view to sort of flex the outer bounds of my understanding, my appreciation of other people. And I bring that then into what I'm writing. And when I'm writing, I'm also really trying as a writer of narrative nonfiction to tell the story, to represent others as fully as I can, and to remove my own judgment so that, again, other people coming to the story can experience the breadth of it on their own.
Absolutely. And I think you completely achieved that. I really enjoyed, going through the story, and there are a lot of facts that you have to include for the story to make sense. And I thought it was really, really interestingly incorporated.
Thank you.
Reflecting on your Pulitzer Prize win, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
How would you describe the importance of organizations like the Associates of the Boston Public Library in sustaining historical collections that allow authors such as yourself to uncover such stories?
Oh, I would say absolutely. Your work is completely essential. Without your having sponsored the digitization of these sources, without your making it available, without your preserving them and continuing to collect, how are we? These sources are the foundations of storytelling, of history telling. So it just would not be possible to make history without you.
That was wonderful. That was an amazing answer. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for being here with us and answering all of our questions.
It's my pleasure.
So I'm really, really excited to share that Ilyon Woo is going to be a literary light for our 2025 dinner.
I'm really honored. I'm really excited. I am a reader first before I'm a writer, and so the reader in me is really excited about meeting the other literary lights who are truly luminous.
Truly, and it's just a really wonderful dinner, and hearing everyone speak is wonderful, and everyone's going to be hanging on to your every word because you literally used the Associates supported work in your work, which is really incredible for us.
I did. Your work made mine possible.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us. This was absolutely wonderful, and I feel really honored that I got to take a behind the scenes look into what went into writing your book and your research process.
Thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to be here, and especially to get close to these amazing manuscripts.